Well, it's a bit hard to believe, but I'm doing the April sowing and growing guide. It seems only like yesterday that I was doing the March one, and yet so much has changed during this month. I've brought all the peppers in here now, and the early tomatoes and everything, and I've taken the potatoes and put those on the allotment in the polytunnel, and I've brought my baby beet leaf greens in here for the salads. And so lots of things have sort of swapped around. Even the apricot tree's got apricots on it now, whereas last month it was just little flowers, and the nectarine tree is pretty close. So, as I always do, what I like to do is just sort of go through the progress on March, because I do like to sort of show the evidence, the things actually that I said I was going to do in March that I actually did do. And then we'll get on to April. So the first thing that I said I was going to do in March was sow some of these little potatoes in containers, and I've got some up there. They're just all coming up there, and I've actually just planted 12, I think it is, out in the allotment beds as well as the super earlies, which are sort of this high now in the polytunnel. The leeks, they just come up. I think, I can't remember where they are now, but somewhere down here, down there. But I've got my early leeks, my summer leeks, and they're just there, and they're looking quite nice. The little cucumbers, pony cucumbers, they are there. So they're coming on quite well. But the early cucumbers, they are in flower now, and they've got actual cucumbers on them, not male flowers. So it won't be long before we're eating cucumbers, I think. But I like to have them in succession, not because cucumbers sort of stop growing or anything like that. It's just that they do get more susceptible to disease the older they are. So I like to have, every couple of months basically, fresh cucumber plants, just in case. The early courgettes are here, and they're looking quite nice. They're going to go in this greenhouse. The traditional courgettes, like the green bush, they're a sort of small bush variety. They'll go on this bench here. The zephyr, which is not really a courgette, it's a summer squash, climbing summer squash. So they will go in the corner there where those peas are, and sort of climb up a similar sort of structure there. And the midnight courgettes didn't germinate. Not everything works. The celeriac's just broken surface down there. The sugar snacks carrots are growing well in the polytunnel. The beetroot's all up there. It's all coming up quite nicely. That will be ready for planting out fairly soon. It's been really cold at night though, so it is a little bit slower growing in here than it would be if I had it in the house under grow lights. But nothing wrong with things growing slow if you don't need them. The brassicas, so my winter brassicas, so we've got colettes, Pentland brig kale, dazzling blue kale, green curly kale, red Russian kale, red boar, scarlet, Nero de Toscana, Nero black magic, and then some cauliflower, some calabrese, some spring cabbage, and some red cabbage, and some Savoy cabbages. So loads and loads of brassicas. They are all at that stage. I think I've got 6 of these trays of brassicas. They're all looking really good. Just starting to come into true leaf now. And I didn't have to do actually any tumbling toms or red profusion for the polytunnel, because I've got enough spare plants here. They're looking, I'm really happy with them. They're just starting to come into flower. I'll pinch those first flowers off actually in a minute, but yeah, they're looking nice. They're not far off, I think 2 weeks off planting, and they're going to go in these hanging baskets up here. The Santa Cruz spinach, that's outside on one of the hardening off benches. I didn't need to do any more parsley because I've got quite a lot of parsley. I've got 6 plants there. I've got some more plants there that I could pot on if I wanted to. So I didn't bother with those. The Tokyo Cross turnips are here. They're looking lovely actually, and I think next week we'll start picking our first succession of turnips, but these will keep us going after that. Same with the radish there. We've been eating radish for a long time now. We'll stop. Maybe that's the last sowing of radish. I don't know. I don't really like radish when it gets too hot. So basically, when it's summer, I stop growing radish. Sowed my first batch of Brussels. I've got some later ones as well to sow, but I haven't sowed those yet. And I've just sowed the early French beans that are going to go in containers where those trees are, but they've not germinated yet. And so another batch of salad rocket. I've got quite a lot of salad rocket outside, just more and more successions. Didn't need to do any more salad onions because I've got quite a lot of salad onions up there, and I've got loads of salad onions in the ground now. And still to do, because I'm actually filming this on the 26th of March, I still got to do my last container sown batch of Sugar Snacks carrots, after which I'm sowing in the ground, and my germination test of Mokum carrots, which are going to be the main batch of carrots that I sow in the ground next month, or in April. And the reason I do my germination tests in the ground is I just find it's much more reliable. I find so many seeds, if you do a germination test on kitchen roll, for example, loads of things will germinate, but when you try to germinate them in soil, the germination is nowhere near as successful. So I always like to do my germination tests in soil. I think it's just so much more reliable as an indicator. And of course, you're not wasting any seeds, because if they do germinate, you can grow them. And I didn't have to do another batch of lettuce because I've just planted out a big batch of lettuce. I've got a few leftovers here. Whoops, nearly spilt water all over myself. Yeah, so I won't need any until April, but that's not very far away. So that, I think, is pretty much it. Oh, I've got my aubergines here as well, and these are the little peppers. So I've got my big peppers here for an early harvest, but my little peppers that are going to get planted out towards the end of May, they're still only tiny. So when people say, oh, I'm a long way ahead, I'm probably not. I think a lot of people have probably got like peppers a lot bigger than that are going to go out in low tunnels or in an unheated polytunnel or something like that. I don't take a risk with mine. I like to plant mine out a bit later, and hence mine are a bit smaller. So let's look at what we're going to do in April. So I'm going to do my main crop leeks. As I said, I've got 2 batches of leeks on the go, one for summer, one for early autumn. I do my main crop leeks just that little bit later, just makes it easier for me. So I do about 60 of those, and about 3 or 4, well, I do 4 seeds to a module, and hope for 3 of them to germinate. I don't actually need to do any more celery. I've got some celery scheduled, but I've got a lot of celery. I've got 12 early plants there. I've got another 6 plants to follow those. We don't eat a huge amount of celery, so I think that's more than enough celery for me. And I'll wait now until I do my winter celery in about July sort of time. Then I've got my first sowing of the Minnesota midget and the champagne watermelons. So that's the first succession to go in the polytunnel. These are going to be quite big plants by the time they get planted out in the polytunnel, but I do want to try and get a succession to my melon harvest. Obviously I don't want them all to come together, so I tend to sow quite a few different varieties and a few different sort of staggered sowing times, but not too late, because if you do them too late they just don't have enough heat to ripen up properly. But anyway, early April is plenty early enough. And they might need a bit of fleece and whatever to keep them happy in the polytunnel even then. So next up's my main crop peas. So I've got a lot of peas on the go. So I've got these peas, which are just set in pods at the moment and they're in full flower. I've got that next succession, which is just starting to flower, but no pod set at all on those yet. Now I've got two successions way behind these on the allotment, one in a container and one in the ground. And so this batch that I'm doing now, they'll go outside along there where those colettes are at the moment, climbing up that frame. And I'm going to do Avi Joan, which is a variety that was sent to me. I don't think you can buy it commercially, but it looks lovely. Really nice for shelling. And in contrast to that, I'll do Oregon Sugar Pod, which is really nice as a mange too. Then I'll do a germination test to my Eskimo carrots. So Eskimo is hugely important sowing of carrots for me. Eskimo is the variety that I'm going to be using for my winter carrots. In fact, I'm still harvesting them now and I'll harvest them until the end of April. And by then my early carrots that I sowed in October will be ready. But the Eskimos, yeah, I mean, just if you're going to sow hundreds and hundreds of carrots, you really want to be sure that germination is pretty good so that you can figure out what spacing to use, whether to oversow or whether to just sow exactly the number that you need. And so I'm going to do a germination test of those, just 25 of them. I'll see how many of those 25 come up. And if they do come up, again, then we'll just eat them. So then I'm going to do my next batch of lettuces, and I'm going to do, oh, just need to look that up, Half Flex, which is Salanova type of lettuce, Navara, Extranet, Canasta, Surat, Hawking, Lola Rossa, and Apache, and Riccia. So all the details, by the way, I'm looking at my iPad at the moment. That's why I'm looking down all the time. And all the details you'll find a link in the description below to what I sowed back in March and what I'm planning to sow in April and the progress and all of that. And yeah, which actually brings me on to my newsletter, so I should mention that at this point. So there's a lot to keep track of in the sowing guide videos, and I don't recommend really you try and keep track of it all, just sort of get an overall feel for what's going on. If you want to keep track and you want to follow along and want to do the same sort of gardening that I do, which you might not, of course, because it's a bit of a crazy way to garden, but if you do want to do it, then subscribe to my newsletter. It's free and it's got everything in it basically. So everything that I'm sowing, everything I'm pricking out, everything I'm potting on, everything that I'm planting, everything that I'm harvesting, all the problems that I'm having, and all the sort of suggestions that I've got, and growing guide links and all of that sort of thing, as well as sort of pointers to all my other resources that are applicable for that time of year. So yeah, you can find that at steverichards.substack.com, and there's a link to it in the description below. So that's the lettuces anyway. That'll be the next batch. So that'll go probably in some of these beds where the colettes are at the moment out there. And next up we've got the Sun Golden, the honeycomb tomatoes. Now I am going to seed some of these, but I have got these plants at the moment, two of which are going to go in the greenhouse and the remainder are going to go in containers in the polytunnel, and they are just starting to side shoot. Well, I'm going to take those side shoots off, not yet, let them get a bit bigger than that, but I'm going to let those side shoots grow on. Then I'm going to take those off in about 2 weeks time, and I'm going to pot those side shoots up, and that's my preferred way of getting my main crop tomatoes. So they're my super early tomatoes. I'll do the main crops like that, and then I'll do the late crops for outside, growing outside. We do quite a lot of tomatoes outside. I'll do those as well from side shoots. I might do a few from seed just to compare the results. But anyway, it's a great way, if you do a super early succession, it's a great way of minimising the number of seeds you need to buy, because obviously tomato seeds are pretty expensive, or some of them are. Anyway, I haven't done any super early Naginas, which are also called Crimson Plum. So I'm going to have to do those from seed, but they're the main cooking tomato that we do. And we also do Black Moon just because the colouring on it is so lovely. And again, that's a great cooking tomato. So yeah, I think I'll do 12 Crimson Plum and 6 Black Moons. And that actually is more than enough cooking tomatoes for us. And they're all going to go in the polytunnel. Then I'll do my first succession of sweet corn. Sometimes it's too early for me to do it sort of 7th of April, which I've got scheduled in here. I often leave it a bit later, and I like walking around the allotment site and seeing all the people who've planted out their sweet corn a lot earlier than I do it, and then comparing when they actually harvest that sweet corn. And very rarely are they harvesting any earlier than I am, and often they're losing their crops. So I do tend to sort of err on the side of doing my sweet corn later, but it is nice for it to come in succession, because obviously we eat, well, not obviously, but we do eat it fresh. We don't freeze it. So yeah, so it is nice just to do an early succession, see how it goes, see what the weather conditions are like, and you know, if weather conditions are favourable, it's sometimes worth doing it early. Last batch of Tokyo cross turnips, as I said, I've got this batch here still to go in, so it's just again to do those in succession. And then I won't do turnips after that. For our white root veg, we'll be eating white beetroot, which I'll talk about in a second. And then my next batch of French beans, I'm doing Algarve French bean, which looks a bit like a runner bean. It's a flat French bean, and Cobra French beans. Pretty boring ones, but I mean, they're just our favourite French beans, and so I'm quite happy to grow those. I'll probably do enough for some of those to go in the polytunnel in big containers, and some of them to go outside, again, along here where these colettes are. I can wrap those if I need to with fleece. It's a bit early to be doing them, but you know, if they don't thrive, you can always just sow more. So, you know, but if an early crop is easily worth a few risks, I think. So I will have plenty of French beans though, so I'm not 100% confident that I'll do them outside, because I'll have French beans in here, I'll have French beans in the polytunnel. But it's nice sometimes to just compare and see how well your outdoor ones do with a little bit of protection compared with your polytunnel ones and your greenhouse ones. Always learning. So next up, the summer cooking greens. And the first one is New Zealand spinach. It's a really prolific outdoor heat-loving spinach. New Zealand spinach, so it's a good alternative to true spinach, so no risk of it bolting or anything like that, although it does drop a lot of seed later on in the season. So if you leave it in the ground in September and October, it'll drop loads and loads of seed, and it'll come up again next year, which we quite like, but I don't think I'm going to get any coming up this year for a variety of reasons, so I'm going to have to sow some rather than just prick plants out from the ground. I'm also going to do Mikado spinach. It's an Asian spinach, and that also does better in the heat than a true spinach, but not that much better. It will still go to seed, but boy is it a lovely spinach. It's got the thickest sort of, I often describe it as a leathery leaf, but it's not leathery in the sense of hard to chew on. It's sort of just really thick and succulent. It's a lovely leaf. But as I say, it will go to seed, so you do have to keep, if you want spinach in summer, you do have to do a lot of successions. And I'm doing Santa Cruz for my summer spinach, and I'll tell you in another video how I do my summer spinach. And then now's the time, sort of middle of April, to do chard and perpetual spinach and things like that. Earlier than that tends to just go to seed in summer. So I'm going to do perpetual spinach, rhubarb chard, and I probably won't do Ford Hook Giant, but that is a lovely chard. I'm just trying to do a lot of things with lots of colour in the leaves and the stems this year, and Ford Hook is just all green, so I'm probably not going to do that. Then I'll do my next batch of, well, my last batch of melons, and I'll do a wide selection of those, and I'll see which ones look the strongest at planting time, because I don't need that many melons, so it doesn't take up very much space to do lots of different ones, and I've got plenty of seeds. So I'm going to do honeydew, I'm going to do champagne, which is a watermelon, I'm going to do Emir, I'm going to do Malaga, Minnesota midget, so quite a few different ones. And I probably am only going to do 4 of my beds, 4 beds, which is 4 plants. So I'm going to have probably 6 plants in the polytunnel and 4 plants outside in my cold frames, which isn't a huge number, but it's enough because they all come together. Well, not all together, but all within a month or something like that. So we're kind of overwhelmed with melons for a month. And it's very nice to be overwhelmed with melons, but really you can't you can't grow many more than that and actually get through them all. So I'm going to do my favoured courgette, which is Zephyr. As I say, it's not really a courgette, it's a summer squash, but it's very courgette-like. But we think it's superior to any courgette that we've tried to grow. So we only do Zephyr really for our main crops. And some of those will go in the polytunnels, some of them will go under low tunnels, again, and some of them will go outside. I just want to compare results in different growing environments again, as I say, always learning. Then, remember I was doing my Mokum germination test at the end of this month, March. Well, towards the end of April, about the 20th of April, something like that, I'll do my main crop, or early main crop, you might say, yeah, let's call it the early main crop succession of carrots in the ground, and I'm going to do Mokum, and hopefully the germination test I did back early on has proved to be successful, and I know exactly sort of what density to do the Mokum in the ground. And we'll eat those all the way through until sort of September, October time, something like that. And it's interesting because a lot of people would say, oh, do your carrots in succession, you know, a few carrots every few weeks. I don't really like to do that. I don't see much point in doing it either. What I found over many years is that carrots that you sow in towards the end of April stand in the ground perfectly well until September. They're still crisp, they're still sweet, they're just a little bit bigger, that's all. You can make them smaller just by planting them at a slightly higher density so that they're a bit cramped and so they don't grow so big, which I often do. But the benefit of doing it like that, I think, is that you're sowing them in one bed and then putting mesh on over them, fine mesh for the carrot fly, over the whole bed, and you're not sort of opening and closing the bed to sow new ones or to thin them out or anything like that. You just do one thin out, one sow in, one thin out, and then you really opening the bed only for a few seconds, basically, just to sort of grab a few bunches of carrots out of it, and then you're closing it up again. So there's very little risk of getting any carrot fly problems. And there's no real disadvantages to it, doing it that way, I find, other than that you'll eventually sort of have a bit of bed space where you've harvested carrots for a month, say, that's empty, and you can easily find something to just pop in there that'll enjoy being underneath that mesh. So anyway, that's where I do my carrots, and it's always worked well for me for many years. So next up are the beetroot that we're going to eat in winter. It's starting in sort of October time. So I've got beetroot up there. They're the ones we're going to be eating now. And there's loads of those there because we eat a lot of beetroot leaves. And so there's loads of those trays are just for beetroot leaves. Anyway, about 23rd of April, I'm going to do Botello, Pablo, Burpees Golden, and Albina. And Albina, not surprisingly, is the white one. Burpees Golden is the golden one. And yeah, so I'm going to do mostly the golden one, because the golden one is by far our most popular beetroot. So we have a few people, including me, who really likes the red beetroot. So I'm going to do about a third of those, but really about 2/3 of them are golden beetroot, because more people eat those. And then the white ones, they're okay. As I say, I use those as a turnip sort of substitute whenever I want something sort of white and crunchy. But they're not as prolific, they're not as reliable, they're not as uniform, they're not as pretty as the other sort of varieties, but they're still worth growing. And then I'm going to do my last sowing of true salad onions. So I'm going to do Guardsman. And then I'm going to switch to Antita, which is, I suppose it is a true salad onion, but it's bred for a summer harvest. So I find most salad onions don't really taste that great over summer, but Antita is really good. So I will do a germination test of Antita, and if that goes well, then I'll be sowing a lot more of those in May. And then Santa Cruz, as I probably mentioned, that is my preferred summer spinach. You still have to sow successions of it because it will eventually go to seed, but it's a nice spinach, and we do quite like having a true spinach all the way through summer. And then we get onto our main crop, potatoes, and actually I'm going to do a mix of second earlies and first earlies, even though I've got loads of early potatoes, just because we really like some of the early varieties. So for example, we really like Vita Noir, the purple one. So we want as many of those as we can get, and we're growing a lot of those at the moment. We've got 3 successions on the go, but yeah, we want a nice big harvest of those, and they keep really well. I think we had the last Vita Noir in March, early March I think, and they were still really lovely. But we're also doing Charlotte, we're doing Sarpamira, and we're doing Estima. So a nice mix there. Then the second succession of sweet corn, and then that's our last succession of sweet corn. And then the winter squash. And we've tried so many winter squashes over the years, but actually nowadays we tend to just do sweet dumpling and crown prince. Debbie, who is the great fan of winter squash, I don't actually like it very much. She absolutely loves crown prince, but there are a few scenarios where sweet dumpling is better than crown prince, especially the immature sweet dumplings. So if you get a big harvest off them, which sometimes you do, and pick them a bit immature, she says they're really amazing. And then we're almost there. Golden purslane is my favourite summer salad crop. We grow a lot of different salads in summer, but golden purslane is the highlight. So I'm going to do a lot of those. They grow outside quite nicely, so I need to make sure I've got a bed ready for those. And then the outdoor, at the end of April, the outdoor tomatoes, I'm doing Tumbler, Honeycomb and Sun Gold. And as I said, I've already got Honeycomb and Sun Gold here, so I'll just be taking side shoots off these plants, and I won't actually be sowing these. But it's there as a reminder, just in case, and it's just possible, I suppose, that I might lose these plants for whatever reason, in which case I'll actually be sowing some seeds. So that is it. That is what I'm planning to do in April, and I'm looking forward to it. I always look forward to this time of year. I'm going to be pretty exhausted by the time I get to the end of May. But then basically I take summer off. So there's hardly anything to do in summer other than harvesting. So it's not so bad. And it's sort of nice to sort of dedicate yourself to a task in sort of towards the end of April and through until sort of the middle to the end of May. Just sort of graft on with the gardening. And that means for me about 10 hours a week of work. Whereas at the moment I'm doing about 3 or 4 hours a week of work, so it's not too bad of gardening. It's easy to keep on top of. I think I'm going to ramble on forever if I don't shut up. So anyway, my name's Steve, and I'll see you soon.